My name is Emma Hale. I'm 30 years old and I live in a quiet, moss-lined neighborhood in Seattle, Washington. My days are filled with spreadsheets, marketing strategies, and the occasional moment of silence that lingers longer than it should. I'm the type of person who brings her own pen to meetings, who remembers every birthday without a Facebook reminder, who keeps the Wi-Fi password printed neatly inside a drawer. To most people, I'm put together. To my coworkers, I'm dependable. To my friends, I'm the steady one. But to my family, I'm just there. Always there. Background noise. I've always been the older sister, not just in age, but in responsibility, in expectation, in self-sacrifice. I came first, but it never really felt like it. Sienna, the younger one by 4 years, was the sparkly one, the bright thing people gravitated toward. Where I was deliberate, she was spontaneous. Where I was quiet, she was loud enough for both of us. Where I planned, she improvised. And in our family, improv got the standing ovation. It wasn't always obvious. When we were kids, it showed up in little ways. My drawings got a smile. Hers got framed. When I scored a 98 on a math test, Mom said "good job" over her shoulder. When Sienna got a 75, she got a full pancake breakfast and balloons that said, "You tried." I didn't resent her at first. I thought maybe I was just more low maintenance. Maybe they trusted me more. Maybe that was love too. But love, as I would learn, isn't always loud, and sometimes its absence is even louder. By the time I hit high school, I had accepted my role, the one who blends into the background, who helps clean up after the party, who keeps track of receipts, and makes sure the dog gets his heartworm pills. I won the regional science fair my junior year, first place out of 82 schools. My parents nodded, mildly impressed, then returned to gushing over Sienna's middle school musical. She played the third flower pot from the left. Mom sewed her costume by hand. I paid for my project supplies myself. College followed the same pattern. I picked project management as a major not because it was flashy, but because it made sense. It had structure. It paid well. And it didn't require me to compete with anyone, especially not with Sienna, who bounced from major to major like it was a fashion trend. Theater, art history, event planning. Finding herself, my mom said, like it was a noble quest. Every pivot came with a new apartment, a fresh credit card, and a teary call home that always ended with money wired into her account. I, meanwhile, graduated early and never asked for a dime. But here's the funny thing about being low maintenance: people forget you need maintenance at all. I moved to Seattle 6 years ago. I built a quiet little life, one that didn't demand attention, but was steady, peaceful, and mine. I had my routines. A local barista who knew my order. A garden that kept trying to die, but I refused to give up on. I didn't post much online. I didn't make a fuss. I called my parents every Sunday like clockwork, even when I had nothing to say. And still, I was forgotten. So when the phone call came, the one where my mother told me in her best customer service voice that there just wasn't room for everyone at Sienna's wedding, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear as the familiar cold settled in. "Emma," she said, "we'll be live streaming the whole thing. It'll be like you're there. Like..." I nodded even though she couldn't see it. I said okay even though it wasn't. And then I smiled because I knew something they didn't. I may not have been invited to the wedding, but I was about to see everything. From the very front row, the word everyone had never felt more subjective. When my mother said there wasn't room for everyone at the wedding, I assumed that meant immediate family would still be included. Parents, siblings, you know, the people who helped shape your entire life. But it turns out in my family, everyone stretches wide for nail technicians and old roommates, but contracts conveniently small when it comes to daughters who are a little too quiet, a little too responsible. I learned the details the way I always did, secondhand, through social media. A flurry of pre-wedding content poured into my feeds: brunches, tastings, cake consultations, dress fittings. Sienna looked radiant in every frame, arms draped over people I barely recognized, but who were somehow essential to the big day. I stared at one photo longer than I should have. It was a blurry, candid Sienna laughing at a champagne bar surrounded by bridesmaids in matching silk robes. Just outside the frame on the bottom right corner, I noticed a furry blur. Winston, our childhood golden retriever. I zoomed in. There he was, wearing a bow tie. The caption read, "Even Winston gets a roll ring bearer anyone." I blinked. My parents had made space for the dog. Not metaphorically, literally. They flew him from Scottsdale to Napa Valley, booked him a stay at a pet-friendly luxury lodge, and fitted him with a custom tuxedo. My mom even posted about it proudly, "No wedding is complete without our golden boy." Meanwhile, their actual firstborn child, me, was sitting in a studio apartment 1,000 miles away, trying to decide whether to send a gift or just ghost the whole event. It would have been laughable if it hadn't cut so deep. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't the type to make scenes. I hadn't been close to Sienna in years, not really. We'd grown into entirely different people. She was glitter and champagne. I was wool sweaters and chamomile tea. I should have expected this. I should have known. But there's a kind of pain that doesn't sting immediately. It settles in slowly, like cold water soaking into your socks. You don't scream, you just feel it in every step. I remembered all the things I'd done for her, the late-night calls when she couldn't sleep, the care packages during college finals, candles, snacks, handwritten notes, the time I co-signed her first car loan because her credit was trashed and she couldn't ask Mom and Dad again. I remembered skipping a work trip to help Dad build that ridiculous IKEA bookshelf she insisted on getting for her first apartment, then leaving halfway through the move because she had brunch plans. None of it had mattered. Not one bit. There wasn't even a fake apology. "No, I wish you could come," or "It's killing me that you won't be there." Just a Zoom link, just a password, just a reminder that even in her perfect, curated world, I was always going to be the blurry edge of the photo, the one who didn't match the aesthetic. Still, I didn't confront them. I didn't start a fight. I did what I'd always done, swallowed the hurt, and nodded along. "It's fine," I texted my mom after she sent the livestream details. "Glad you understand, sweetie," she replied with a smiley face emoji. Smiley face. And that was it. The week before the wedding, I walked past a pet boutique and saw a dog-sized tuxedo in the window. For half a second, I wondered if Winston's was the same brand. I stood there longer than I meant to, hand clenched around my coffee cup, jaw tight. I wasn't mad at the dog, of course. He was just doing what dogs do, loyal, obedient, good in photos. But that didn't change the fact that in my family's carefully constructed fairy tale, I didn't belong. Not even as a supporting character. They said there wasn't room for me, but I was starting to wonder what would happen when their perfect little wedding didn't go as planned. And something told me I was about to find out. There's a photo on the mantel in my parents' living room, one that's been there for over a decade. It's of Sienna in her middle school play dressed as a tree, not even the lead tree, just a tree. A lopsided felt trunk wrapped around her body, green construction paper leaves sticking out of her head like a bad salad. My mother sewed the costume herself, spent weeks on it. The photo is framed in gold, spotlighted by a tiny lamp. Just a few feet away, on a low bookshelf that collects dust, sits a small silver trophy. It has no nameplate, no lighting, no story. That trophy is mine. I won it my junior year of high school, first place at the statewide science fair. I built a fully functional voice-activated greenhouse climate control system using salvaged materials and my weekend job money. I remember the moment the judges handed it to me. I had expected something. A hug, a family dinner. We're proud of you, but all I got was a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before my mom launched into a rant about how Sienna's cardboard costume wasn't sturdy enough for her upcoming performance. I placed the trophy on the shelf myself when we got home. No one noticed. That was the pattern. My wins were quiet. Their responses were quieter. I didn't need a parade, but I think I deserved more than polite indifference. Over the years, I became the glue in the background. The girl with straight A's and no drama. The one who handled emergencies without making a scene. I filed taxes early, brought side dishes to Thanksgiving, remembered everyone's dietary restrictions, and texted reminders before birthdays. I was the living embodiment of the phrase "handled," and somehow that made me invisible. When Sienna graduated after changing majors 3 times, my parents hosted a backyard party with string lights, a catered taco truck, and a live acoustic band. When I graduated early with honors, they sent me a gift card to Target. Once, when Sienna's car broke down on the freeway, I drove an hour in the rain to meet her and called to pay because she didn't know how. She never thanked me. Mom did briefly. She said, "You're so reliable, Emma. It's such a relief not to have to worry about you." It was meant as a compliment, but it felt like a sentence, because that's what I had become, the daughter who didn't need to be worried about, the one who handled her own problems so efficiently her family forgot she even had them, the one who showed up, pitched in, and quietly disappeared before the photos were taken. Sienna's life was loud and messy and overexposed. Mine was stable, orderly, quietly successful. And stability, I'd learned, didn't make good stories. A few years ago, I got promoted at my firm, my first major leadership role. It had taken months of hard work and late nights. I texted my parents to share the news. My dad replied, "Proud of you, kiddo." Mom didn't respond at all. 2 days later, she posted a boomerang of Sienna trying on white dresses just for fun, captioned, "My baby girl is all grown up." Sienna wasn't even engaged. Sometimes I wondered if I had done something wrong, if I had failed some unspoken family test. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became I hadn't failed. I had simply outgrown their ability to recognize me. To them, I wasn't the golden child or the crisis child or even the quirky rebel. I was the support beam. Sturdy, silent, unnoticed, but even support beams crack under pressure, and for the first time I was beginning to feel the fault lines forming. I once read that money doesn't change people, it just reveals who they already are. If that's true, then my family's true nature had been showing in Venmo requests and wire transfers for years. It started with little things, $100 here, $250 there. "Just until next week," Sienna would say, her voice breezy as always, like it was no big deal. And maybe it wasn't, at first. I had a good job, no major debts. Helping out felt natural, expected even, but it added up. There was the $600 for her rent shortfall when she was trying to launch a jewelry-making business that never got off the ground. Another $450 for a temporary loan after she crashed her car and didn't want to go through insurance. I paid her deductible. She paid me back with a scented candle and a half-hearted thank you note. Then there were the times I helped our parents quietly, invisibly. They never asked directly. They just hinted. A sigh about the HVAC unit needing replacement. A comment about how much Dad's medication cost. One Thanksgiving, Mom casually mentioned the rising price of groceries and how tight things had been since Dad cut back at work. I wired $800 that night. No one acknowledged it. No one needed to. I'd become the financial shock absorber in a family that never budgeted for me. It wasn't about the money. Not really. I'm not the type to keep score. But I couldn't help noticing how transactional everything felt, how easily my role shifted from daughter to donor, without anyone asking if I was okay with that. There were no calls checking in on me, no questions about how work was going, whether I was happy, whether I needed anything. I was the giver, the responsible one, the one who didn't ask. So they stopped offering. Over time, I began to see the pattern. Sienna made messes, and I cleaned them up. She lived in chaos, and I provided the safety net. My parents cheered her on from the sidelines, but when the credit cards got declined or the lease came due, guess who quietly stepped in? They told me I was dependable, like it was a compliment, but what they meant was, "You are useful," and maybe I would have kept being useful forever if it weren't for the wedding. The moment my mom told me there wasn't room for me, the years of silent transfers and quiet sacrifices came rushing back like a flood. All the times I filled in the gaps without being asked. All the ways I'd earned my place not just in that wedding but in this family and still came up short. I had wired thousands of dollars over the years expecting nothing in return but maybe a seat at the table. Instead, they gave me a Zoom link and a password. A few nights after that call, I sat down at my desk and opened my banking app. I clicked through the recurring payments tab. There they were, monthly transfers to my parents' joint account for household help, the credit card I paid off for Sienna that she never used again, the PayPal automatic top-up she'd linked to my card 2 years ago and apparently forgotten. I stared at the numbers for a long time. Then I deleted all of it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I wasn't a villain. I wasn't even angry. I was just done. Done being the invisible backbone of a family that didn't notice I had bones to begin with. Done funding their curated fairy tale while living in the margins of their story. If I was going to be left out of the wedding, fine. But they were no longer going to be carried to it on my back. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't come with yelling or slammed doors. It's quiet, polished, delivered in lowercase text messages and polite excuses, dressed up in soft fonts and pastel packaging. That was how I learned that even my gifts didn't belong. I had spent weeks thinking about what to give Sienna and Grayson for their wedding, not because I expected an invitation. By that point I knew better, but because despite everything, some stubborn piece of me still wanted to honor the occasion, to acknowledge in some small way the sister I once braided hair with on rainy days and snuck candy with under the dining table. So I chose something personal, something meaningful. Our grandmother had passed down a vintage crystal decanter set old European glass etched by hand with 4 matching tumblers. She used to bring it out only on special holidays and only for the adults. It was one of the few heirlooms she left behind, and after she passed, I'd inherited it. Not because anyone gave it to me. No one else wanted it. They all said it was too old-fashioned or too fragile. But I loved it. I kept it wrapped in linen in the back of my cupboard, waiting for the right moment. This felt like it. I carefully packed it in satin-lined wood, added a handwritten card, and shipped it to the address on the wedding website. It felt like closure, like maybe I could still be part of the story, even if only through a gesture. 5 days later, the box came back. Returned. Unopened. Taped to the top was a pastel pink envelope. Inside was a note written in my mother's handwriting, still swoopy and elegant, like she was always preparing for someone else to read it. Emma, we appreciate the thought, but the gift doesn't quite match the overall wedding aesthetic. Sienna and Grayson are going for a more modern, minimalist vibe, and we're trying to keep things cohesive. Love, Mom. I sat on the floor for a long time, the box unopened beside me, the note still clutched in my hand. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just stunned. It didn't match the aesthetic. I hadn't realized love had a theme. The note wasn't cruel. That was the worst part. It was practical, as if she were discussing napkin colors or flower arrangements, not her daughter's attempt to contribute to a celebration she'd been excluded from. I wondered if Sienna had even seen the gift, or the note, or if Mom had just intercepted it like an unwanted package at the front desk. The decanter stayed in its box after that. I didn't bother unpacking it. Somehow it felt tainted, like it had absorbed the rejection. I shoved it to the back of the hall closet under a pile of winter scarves I rarely used. That night I made myself a drink, not from the fancy decanter, but from a chipped mug that used to sit in my college dorm. I sat on the couch in the dark, feet tucked under me, sipping slowly. Outside, the world kept moving, cars passing, someone's dog barking down the street, laughter echoing from an upstairs balcony. Inside, something had shifted. There's a moment in every quiet person's life when silence stops being a shield and starts becoming a mirror. And that night I saw myself clearly. I saw the woman who kept showing up to a stage she was never cast in, the one who kept rehearsing love in a play that had no lines written for her. And for the first time, I stopped blaming myself for not fitting the aesthetic. Maybe I wasn't the wrong shape. Maybe the frame was just too small. The official wedding invitation arrived via email. Not the thick, creamy cardstock kind tied with ribbon or sealed with wax. No romantic calligraphy, no thoughtful note. Just a subject line that read, Sienna and Grayson's wedding livestream access, sent from a company I'd never heard of, Ever After Events. The body of the email included a Zoom link, a password that looked like a Wi-Fi code, and a sterile graphic featuring their names in swirly gold text, A Day of Love. Beneath that, the date time, and a polite line asking virtual attendees to remain muted and respectful during the broadcast. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. This was my invitation. Not a warm phone call from Sienna, not even a group text. A bulk email. I imagined the scene, Sienna and my mom sitting at the kitchen table, curating a list of who was too distant or not on brand for their vision. I wondered how long they debated whether to include me. I wondered if they debated it at all. The next few days were a blur of pre-wedding updates, just not to me. Social media turned into a minefield. Photos from the bridal shower flooded my feed. A champagne tower, personalized macarons. Sienna holding up a diamond-studded bride hair clip while everyone else wore coordinated beige. I watched it all unfold from my couch in Seattle, a silent observer to a show I hadn't auditioned for. Then came the bachelorette weekend in Vegas. I didn't even recognize half the girls in the group photos, but there they were, tagged, praised, hugged, adored. Matching sequined sashes that read Bride Tribe. Laughter in every frame. Strangers pulled into the spotlight while I was kept in the shadows. And just when I thought I couldn't feel more replaced, more irrelevant, I saw the photo that broke me. Winston. Our family dog. 17 years old. Wearing a miniature tuxedo. The caption read, "Our little gentleman is all ready to walk down the aisle." I stared at the screen, breath caught somewhere between a scoff and a sob. The dog got an outfit. The dog got a role. The dog got a front row seat. I wasn't angry at Winston, of course. He was old sweet, and probably had no idea what any of it meant. But that photo captured the absurdity of it all, how thoroughly I'd been erased from this narrative. I had done everything right. I had played my part. And still, when the family cast its final performance, I wasn't even in the credits. Later that afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Henderson, our old neighbor, at the grocery store. She lit up when she saw me. "Emma, my goodness, you look wonderful. I heard Sienna's getting married. Such a handsome young man. I saw the engagement photos online. I bet your mother is over the moon. What are you wearing to the big day?" The question hit me like a slap. I smiled, lips tight. "It's going to be a very small, curated affair," I said, echoing the words I'd heard on the phone. "I'll be watching from home." Mrs. Henderson's smile faltered just slightly. She patted my arm in that awkward way people do when they don't know what to say. "Oh, well, that's modern." I nodded. "Sure is." I left my cart in the produce aisle and walked straight out of the store. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, the silence heavy around me. I opened the email again, rereading the invitation that felt more like a receipt. I clicked the Zoom link to test it. The preview window opened, showing a placeholder image of an altar overflowing with white roses. There was even a chat box. "Welcome to the live stream," it said. I closed my laptop, because for the first time I wasn't just excluded. I was being invited to watch it happen in real time, like a ghost. The wedding was set for the third Saturday in June, a perfect date according to the blog posts and bridal magazines. Early enough to avoid peak summer heat, late enough for the roses to bloom just right. Sienna always had a flair for timing. She liked when things looked effortless, even if someone else was breaking their back behind the scenes. By now, my role was clear. There would be no last-minute seat added, no phone call filled with regret, no apology. The RSVP I kept pretending might still arrive an envelope, an email, a voicemail from Sienna, never came. Instead, a week before the big day, a box showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting anything. I'd stopped opening deliveries with hope, but this one caught my eye, wrapped in sleek cream paper with gold ribbon, the kind of packaging that screams Pinterest board perfection. I opened it slowly. Inside was a virtual guest kit. Seriously. A small bottle of sparkling cider, a miniature scented candle labeled "Love Always," and a branded tissue packet that read, "For your happy tears." There was also a fold-out card printed in faux calligraphy. "Though we are miles apart, you are close to our hearts. Please join us from home as we say, 'I do.' Your presence, even virtual, is cherished too." There was no signature, no personal note, just a mass-produced sentiment wrapped in expensive cardstock. I stared at the tissue packet for a long time. Happy tears. Who did they think I was crying for? I folded everything neatly back into the box, except for the candle. That I lit. Not for the wedding, but for the parts of me that still ached to be included. The part that still thought, maybe, just maybe, someone would notice the absence. But they didn't. They never had. I kept replaying the moment Mom told me over the phone, her voice syrupy sweet. "You understand, don't you, Emma? The venue is small. We're keeping it intimate." What she meant was, you don't fit the picture. The picture had room for Sienna's old college roommate, Brenda, and her new boyfriend, Chad, whose entire personality revolved around graphic tees and home-brewed beer. It had room for Aunt Jill's book club friend. It had room for Tiffany Sienna's nail tech, who once called my taste in manicures basic. And of course, it had room for Winston. I wasn't bitter about the guests themselves. I was bitter that I had been left out so cleanly, so efficiently. Like I had been cropped out of a family photo with a pair of scissors and no one even checked to see if I was still breathing. This wasn't some misunderstanding. It wasn't a budget issue or a headcount mistake. It was intentional. They didn't want me there. And that's when something inside me shifted. It was small at first. A quiet withdrawal. I stopped replying to the group thread when Mom sent updates about centerpieces and menus. I muted Sienna's Instagram stories. I stopped checking for texts that were never coming. I didn't rage or cry, I just unplugged. That was my first act of rebellion, unplugging from the performance, refusing to applaud a show where I wasn't even listed in the program. The old me would have sent a card, maybe even a gift just to keep the peace. I would have plastered on a smile attended virtually and posted something supportive because that's what I'd been taught. Be gracious, be bigger, be quiet. But not this time. This time I was done performing grace for people who couldn't even offer basic decency. The RSVP didn't come. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need it to, because maybe I wasn't meant to be part of their picture-perfect day. Maybe I was meant to witness what happened when the picture cracked. The night before the wedding, Seattle was overcast, gray, and cool, the kind of early summer evening where the light hangs low and everything feels like it's waiting for something to happen. I sat at my kitchen table, swirling a glass of wine I hadn't yet tasted, staring at the little white box that held my virtual guest kit. I hadn't touched it since the day it arrived, but tonight it felt like a challenge. I pulled the candle back out and reread the card inside. Your presence, even virtual, is cherished too. It was laughable now. Cherished, I hadn't heard Sienna say my name in over 3 months. I couldn't even remember the last time we spoke about something real, something that didn't involve her asking for a favor, or Mom calling on her behalf. I considered skipping the live stream altogether. I didn't need to see it. I wasn't a masochist. Why watch the curated pageantry of a family that had erased me? But something inside me, something cold, curious, and quietly defiant wanted to. Not out of spite, not even out of hope, but to see the truth. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't mourning the wedding. I wasn't even mourning the absence. I was mourning the lie. The lie I'd lived with for 30 years that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, supported everyone else without complaint, they would eventually notice, appreciate, include. That lie had held me in place my entire adult life. But the box, the email, the live stream link, they made it plain. There would be no reward for being the stable one, no seat at the table for the silent backbone. So I chose something different. I got ready. I showered, did my hair, wore the navy blue dress I bought for a work gala last year, but never got to wear because I had to cancel last minute, ironically, to cover for Dad's knee surgery after Sienna bailed on driving him to the appointment. Tonight, I wore it for myself. I poured a glass of chilled Sauvignon Blanc, the fancy bottle I'd been saving for something special. I set my laptop on the coffee table and connected it to the big screen. I dimmed the lights, lit the same candle they'd sent me, and sat down on the couch like I was attending a private screening. Because in a way I was. The link opened to a waiting screen, an image of the venue drenched in sunlight, white roses spilling from every corner. A title card across the bottom read, "A Day of Love, Sienna and Grayson," in soft gold script. The audio hadn't kicked in yet, but the chat box was live. Already, digital guests were typing, "So excited for you both. Can't wait to watch you walk down the aisle. Love from Aunt Carol." Aunt Carol, she wasn't invited either. I remembered Mom calling her too dramatic. Guess we could start a club. I typed nothing. I just watched. 10 minutes in the video feed started to move. A wide-angle shot of the altar white folding chairs filled with real guests. There was Mom stiff and poised in her taupe silk dress, her posture ramrod straight. Next to her, Dad looked vaguely confused, as if he'd stumbled into the wrong event, but was too polite to leave. Then came Grayson, handsome, polished, visibly sweating under his tailored tux. The string quartet began their opening notes, soft, classical, expensive. And then she arrived. Sienna, the perfect bride. She floated down the aisle on Dad's arm bouquet and hand veil like gossamer light. She was beautiful, of course. That was never the issue. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her gaze darted, scanning the crowd like she was looking for something or someone who wasn't there. I sipped my wine and sat back. This wasn't my wedding. It wasn't my celebration. But it was no longer my heartbreak either, because something had shifted. I wasn't waiting to be let in anymore. I was watching clearly, calmly from the outside. And for the first time, I realized that maybe the most powerful person in the room was the one who wasn't even in it. The ceremony began with all the glossy precision of a luxury perfume commercial. The camera panned across the altar again, now decked in so many white roses, it looked like someone had massacred a bridal boutique. The chairs were arranged in symmetrical rows. String musicians perched on the sidelines like swans drawing their bows across cello strings with rehearsed elegance. And then, in the center of it all, Sienna and Grayson. Their hands clasped, their smiles tight. If I didn't know better, I'd say everything looked perfect. But I did know better. Perfection doesn't squint like that. It doesn't clench its jaw when the officiant mispronounces the groom's last name twice. Logan. Sorry. Grayson. Davis. Noah. Davies. Smith. I stifled a laugh into my wine glass. The camera lingered a moment too long on Sienna's frozen smile, which had begun to fracture at the edges. Mom's face twitched behind her, a mix of anxiety and silent commands. I could practically hear her whispering, "Fix it. Smile harder." The sound system started acting up next. At first, it was just a little feedback, harmless, awkward, forgivable. But then, as Grayson began to recite his vows, the microphone popped so loudly the audio cut out entirely. He paused, tried again, projecting his voice now like he was auditioning for Broadway. "I promise to pop." Nothing. The audio didn't just stutter, it vanished. Total silence. On screen, I watched as Sienna's mouth tightened into a straight line. She turned sharply to look toward the sound technician, who froze like prey in the presence of a predator. There it was, the crack in the veneer. My laptop screen became a window into a performance collapsing in real time. And I wasn't just watching, I was documenting it in my mind, like a court stenographer with a front-row view to justice. As the ceremony stumbled toward completion, the reception began to warm up. The camera feed shifted to a lavish tent strung with fairy lights and filled with long banquet tables dripping in florals and crystal glassware. Guests mingled, champagne flowed, and then the speeches. I didn't expect much. The maid of honor gave a shallow, overly rehearsed tribute filled with childhood anecdotes and inside jokes that probably weren't even that funny at the time. Her delivery was bubbly and breathless. The chat box flooded with heart emojis. Then came the best man, Brandon Keene. I felt my spine go rigid. I hadn't seen Brandon in years, not since he ghosted me after a string of what I foolishly believed were serious dates. Apparently, he was now Grayson's college buddy, and somehow his most trusted friend. He stumbled to the mic, already flushed with alcohol and the misguided confidence of a man who thinks he's charming. All right, he slurred, holding up his glass. Let's talk about the legend, the myth, the man Grayson freaking Miller laughter. Sienna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Brandon launched into tales of frat parties and late-night road trips. Okay, harmless enough. But then he took a turn. And man, don't even get me started on that bachelor party. Woo boy, Vegas will never be the same. Shout out to the Kitten Club. Don't ask, don't tell, right? The room went quiet. On the screen, I watched Mom freeze mid-sip. Dad blinked like he hadn't heard it right. Sienna slowly turned toward Grayson, her expression hardening with every syllable. Wait, what she said aloud. No microphone needed. Brandon chuckled, oblivious. Come on, Sienna, relax. It's just a joke. No one's telling her about the Kitten Club, right? Haha, unless you brought back a souvenir gray. The camera zoomed in just in time to catch Sienna's bouquet lowering, and her hand tightening around the stems like she was about to bludgeon someone with it. I didn't breathe. Neither did anyone on screen. It was in that moment, the split second between the joke and the implosion, that I realized something profound. This wasn't just poetic justice. It was live-streamed karma. It happened in an instant. 1 second, the reception tent was holding its collective breath, suspended in the kind of tension you could slice with a cake knife. The next, chaos. Sienna didn't scream, not at first. She leaned forward toward the microphone still clutched in Brandon Keene's fumbling hand and plucked it from him like a surgeon removing a weapon. Her fingers were white at the knuckles, jaw tight enough to cut glass. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was sharp. No trace of bridal sweetness, no photo-ready modulation, just fury. "Grayson," she said, eyes boring into him like lasers. "We talked about this. No details from your little boy's trip." Grayson, who had been smiling nervously just moments before, looked like he'd just been shoved into an open grave. "It was just a joke," he stammered. Brandon was being a joke. Her voice rose. A joke about what exactly? About what happened at the kitten club? Or about the part where your best man accidentally mentioned something you promised to never speak about again? There was a loud cough somewhere in the third row. Then the unmistakable ping of a champagne flute shattering against the marble floor. The room, already breathless now, felt like it had fallen into a black hole. Sienna turned back to Brandon. "Are you drunk?" Brandon opened his mouth, closed it, then gave a dopey shrug. "Only a little." And just like that, the bouquet was no longer a symbol of romance. She held it like a weapon. And then, just as Sienna's mouth curled around a word I knew would go viral for all the wrong reasons, the live stream froze. My screen pixelated, shimmered, and locked into a single image, a perfect digital painting of familial collapse. Sienna mid-scream, her face contorted with rage. The bouquet raised in the air like a war club. Grayson standing beside her, mouth open in horrified disbelief. Brandon slightly out of frame, eyes glazed. In the background, Mom frozen mid-reach. One hand lifted her face, pure panic. Glass shards sparkled at their feet. And at the bottom of the screen, still glowing in soft gold script, the event's branding line remained Sienna and Grayson, a day of love. I sat there blinking at it, wine glass paused mid-air. For a while, I didn't move. I just absorbed it. It was beautiful in its own twisted way. A picture-perfect moment, not of unity, not of celebration, but of revelation. The kind you can't manufacture with string lights and Instagram filters. The kind that rips through the polish and leaves something honest behind. For years, I'd watched them pretend. Pretend Sienna was flawless. Pretend the family was functional. Pretend that I didn't mind being invisible. And now the world hell, the internet was watching the truth unfold in real time. Except now the truth was stuck, frozen, suspended in pixels like a cautionary tale. I stared at the screen for another minute, then closed the laptop lid with a soft click. The silence afterward was thick. Not empty, not sad, just still. I sat back against the couch and exhaled slowly. Not out of relief, not out of satisfaction, but out of finality. There was no vindication in watching your family implode, just confirmation that you weren't crazy, that the years of imbalance, favoritism, and invisible labor hadn't been in your head, that the gut feeling, the one that whispered this isn't fair, this isn't love, had been right all along. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A group message from Mom. "Dearest friends and family. Please disregard any technical difficulties with the live stream earlier. We are experiencing a minor issue. We kindly ask that no one share or repost footage. This is a private event. We appreciate your understanding." I laughed. A short, sharp sound. It bounced off the walls of my apartment and echoed like something newly freed, a minor issue. It was a full-on nuclear meltdown wearing a $12,000 Vera Wang dress, and the best part, I hadn't lifted a finger. They had built this moment themselves, brick by curated brick. All I did was watch, from the front row. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The live stream had gone down only 30 minutes earlier, but already the internet had done what it does best, spread the wreckage. TikTok, Twitter, even Facebook, my feeds lit up like fireworks. The clip was everywhere. Someone had recorded their screen just in time to catch Brandon's drunken speech, Sienna's public meltdown, and the shattering of both glass and decorum. The frozen frame the moment right before the livestream cut was already a meme. When you realize you married a red flag in a tux. My face when someone brings up Vegas at the altar. POV. You just lost the narrative in front of 300 people in the internet. The hashtags were cruel. The comments were worse. And yet, I didn't feel bad. I felt something else. Stillness. Not gloating, not joy, just an eerie, quiet clarity, like the aftermath of a storm where everything is finally honest. Then came the call. My phone buzzed with the name I hadn't seen light up my screen in weeks, Mom. I let it ring. She called again, then again. On the third try, she left a voicemail. 1 minute later, a text arrived. Emma, I know you're there. This is a family emergency. Please pick up. I stared at the screen. Family emergency. Now I was family. I placed the wine glass down, gently, took a breath, and answered on speaker. Hello, Emma. Her voice was frantic, brittle. Did you see it? I didn't respond. Did you see what they're saying online? It's a disaster. Sienna's in tears. Grayson is furious. We need you to help take it down. Take it down, I echoed. You're good with computers, she rushed on. You work in marketing, can't you report it? Flag it, call TikTok, call someone? This is defamation. It's not defamation if it actually happened, I said calmly. There was a beat of silence, then a sharp inhale. How can you be so cold? She snapped. Your family is falling apart. My family, I repeated slowly, told me there wasn't room for me. Emma. This isn't the time for I cut her off. Not loudly, just clearly. With all due respect, Mom, I'm not sure this is my emergency to handle. There it was. The sentence I hadn't realized I'd been building toward for months, maybe years. On the other end of the line, I could hear her breathing. Strained, silent, stunned. I'm just a viewer, I added softly. Remember, she didn't respond. So I ended the call. Not angrily, not dramatically, just ended it. My laptop still sat closed on the coffee table. The final image from the live stream seared into my memory. The bouquet raised the groom, frozen the lie unraveling on high-speed fiber optics for the entire world to witness. It had taken 30 years and a $60,000 wedding to reveal what I'd known all along. I had never truly been part of that world. I had only ever existed on the margins, good enough to fix things, pay for things, show up when needed, disappear when not. And now for the first time I wasn't just excluded, I had excluded myself. There was no seat at the table, no thank you card, no belated text from Sienna saying I wish you were here, and now there never would be, because this disaster, this beautifully unplanned, uncurated spiral into chaos, it didn't belong to me. It belonged to them. I poured the last of the wine into my glass, leaned back against the cushions and smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just free. Let them try to scrub it from the internet. Let them send mass apologies and PR statements and spin the story into something digestible. Me, I was going to sleep like a baby. They said I wasn't invited, but I still got the best seat in the house. The next morning, I woke to 17 unread messages, 12 from the family group chat, resurrected from the dead for what could only be described as a digital panic spiral, and 5 from individual relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, when a wedding goes viral for all the wrong reasons, even the estranged cousins crawl out of the woodwork. I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing to say, no opinion worth offering, no olive branch I felt obligated to extend. I hadn't started the fire. I wasn't the one who handed the best man a microphone and a whiskey tumbler. All I'd done was watch. The group chat was a mess of damage control. We're asking everyone to report the video. Please don't comment, it just drives the algorithm. If anyone speaks to press, say nothing happened. This family values privacy. That last one made me laugh out loud. Privacy. From the people who streamed a wedding, like it was an episode of The Bachelor, from the same family who invited 150 guests, but not their own daughter. I muted the chat. Later that afternoon, Sienna finally texted me. Not an apology. Not even a check-in. Just, "Can you help us with the video stuff? I heard you know how TikTok works." That was it. No, I miss you. No, how are you? Just another favor thrown into the void like a coin in a fountain they never bothered to wish upon. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in the little sunlit corner of my apartment with a cup of coffee, and finally, for the first time in a long time, made a list not for groceries or holiday gifts, not for bills or reminders. A list of what I wanted, what I needed. No one else's voice on the page. No space for anyone who thought of me only when things broke. They wanted me when I was useful, but now they were on fire. And I had finally learned how to walk away from burning buildings without offering to rebuild them. This wasn't my emergency. It never had been. While the rest of my family was busy spinning press statements and burying TikToks, I was busy touring open houses. I had a folder on my laptop labeled Sienna's Wedding Fund, a private joke that started as petty sarcasm but quickly turned into something real. It contained spreadsheets, listings, and savings I'd once earmarked for family emergencies, just in case Mom needed a new roof, or Sienna's latest business idea needed to be rescued. Turns out, none of them needed rescuing, at least not from me. So I shifted focus. I met with realtors. I learned terms like escrow and pre-approval. I compared crime rates and school zones, even though I wasn't married, didn't have kids, and wasn't planning on any of that anytime soon. This wasn't about settling down. It was about staking a claim in something that belonged entirely to me. After 2 weeks of searching, I found it. A 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood just starting to turn the corner. Wide porch, tall trees, slightly crooked fence I already loved. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream curated or aesthetic, but it had good bones. It felt solid, real, kind of like me. When I signed the papers, there were no balloons, no champagne toasts, no family members clapping from the sidelines. Just me, my realtor, and a notary in a small office with too much fluorescent lighting. And yet it felt bigger than any wedding. It was the first time I had put my name, only my name, on something permanent. Not as a co-signer, not as a safety net, not as someone else's backup plan. Just me. I bought myself a house, not to prove a point, not to flex, not even to spite them, but because after a lifetime of building things for other people, science fair projects, IKEA furniture, emotional scaffolding, I finally decided to build something for myself. This wasn't a rebound from being left out, it was a revolution. And every square foot of that little house whispered a quiet, powerful truth. I wasn't boring. I wasn't background. I was the foundation. I had just been giving it to the wrong people. 3 weeks after the wedding, I came across an article in a local business journal that made me pause mid-scroll. Luxury wedding venue. The Grand Terrace files for bankruptcy following viral livestream incident. I clicked faster than I'd like to admit. The article detailed how the Grand Terrace, Sienna's coveted Napa Valley venue, where waitlists stretched over a year, had suffered a wave of last-minute cancellations. Clients cited reputational risk and poor event execution. The viral footage from Sienna's wedding had cast a long shadow. People didn't want to say "I do" in the same place where a best man drunkenly exposed a groom's secrets and a bride nearly committed floral assault on camera. I couldn't stop reading. Apparently, the backlash had been swift. Within days of the video hitting TikTok, wedding blogs picked it up. Reaction channels dissected it. Memes flourished. The Kitten Club became a punchline for disaster. The venue tried to do damage control, deleted social posts, vague statements about unauthorized footage, promises of enhanced security, but the internet doesn't forget. And now, neither would the vendors, the planners, or the clients who had spent 5 figures to reserve a reputation. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen, not out of schadenfreude, but awe. The very place where I had been denied a seat had imploded not because of me, but because of them. They had curated perfection to the point of exclusion, and in doing so they'd built a house of glass. I was just the witness to the shattering, and yet there I was sitting in my new home surrounded by boxes and paint samples and plants I hoped wouldn't die in the first month. It was quiet, a quiet they would have once called boring, but to me it was everything. No live streams, no applause, no audience to perform for, just my life unfiltered. While Sienna and Grayson were in intensive couples counseling, trying to salvage what was left of their very public union, I was building something silent and strong. One afternoon, I met Uncle Theo for coffee. He was one of the few people who hadn't sent me a frantic message or tried to pull me into the family cleanup crew. He greeted me with a grin and a raised eyebrow. "So," he said, sipping black coffee, "heard you've been buying up half the city." I laughed. "Just one house. A good one," he said. "A smart one." We sat in a small corner cafe as the world hummed around us, dogs barking outside a toddler's screaming for more whipped cream jazz music, playing over mismatched speakers. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You were always the one who saw things clearly, Emma." Took the rest of the family a little longer to catch up. I didn't say anything right away, just stirred my drink, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time seen. Not for what I could fix. Not for what I gave, but for who I was. And maybe that was the real twist. Not the wedding meltdown or the viral fame or the shattered venue. It was that quietly, without announcement or spectacle, I had found something real. Not in a wedding aisle, not in a spotlight, but in a slow, steady, peaceful life I built myself. And unlike everything they lost, it couldn't be canceled. It couldn't be uninvited. And it damn sure couldn't be taken away. That evening, after coffee with Uncle Theo, I walked home in the soft light of early dusk. My neighborhood smelled like jasmine and fresh-cut grass. Sprinklers ticked rhythmically. A kid rode past on a bike with baseball cards flapping in his spokes, making a sound like applause. It made me smile. Not because anything dramatic had happened. Quite the opposite, because for once, everything was still. I stepped through the door of my home, and paused in the entryway, taking it in. The paint was still fresh in the hallway. A new rug had arrived that morning. The bookshelf I'd built over the weekend held my favorite novels and a little ceramic dish I made in a 6th grade art class. I'd kept it all these years, even though it was lopsided and cracked. It looked perfect here. Nothing about this life was accidental. Every bit of it had been a choice, a shift. The peace I was living in wasn't gifted to me. It wasn't inherited like Sienna's wedding budget or her social following. It was earned. Built quietly, brick by emotional brick, in the spaces where I'd once held my breath and waited to be noticed. And now no one needed to notice. No one needed to clap or comment or approve. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. And in doing so, I'd found something my family, with all their filters and live streams and perfectly posed moments, never seemed to grasp. Peace isn't passive. It's not a byproduct of being quiet or polite. Peace is an act of rebellion, a declaration. It's walking away from noise and standing in your own silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally know what's worth saying yes to, and what deserves a lifetime of no. The next time my mother called, I let it ring 4 times before answering, not out of spite, out of choice. I was standing in the middle of my new kitchen, barefoot, sorting through a box labeled random drawer junk, when the phone buzzed. I stared at the screen. Mom. Mobile. For once, my chest didn't tighten. There was no dread, just a quiet readiness. "Hi, Mom," I said, placing a roll of tape on the counter. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "Emma, we need your help." There it was again. Need. The only time I was ever centered in a sentence. "I thought you might," I replied. "Voice even." She launched in quickly. "We're dealing with some serious fallout. The clip's been reposted on Instagram Reels now. Sienna's boss saw it. She hasn't been back to work. She's humiliated. We're trying to get ahead of it. Could you know, work your marketing magic?" "You mean delete the internet?" I said flatly. A pause, then a sigh. "Emma, please. This is serious. We can't afford to let this define her. She's already talking about canceling the honeymoon. She hasn't slept." "Your father hasn't slept." "I have," I said. "I've slept great." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, fragile in a way I didn't recognize. "We didn't mean to hurt you. You know that, right?" "No," I said. "I don't know that." "Sweetheart." I closed my eyes. "I need to say this, Mom. and I need you to listen without interrupting." Silence. I was never angry that I didn't get a seat at the wedding. I was angry that you never thought I deserved one. I've spent years showing up, helping, paying, fixing, and never once did anyone stop to ask how I was doing, or what I needed, or if, maybe, just maybe, I should have been treated like part of the family, not the support team. "I didn't see it that way," she said, barely above a whisper. "That's the problem," I replied. "You never did." She didn't defend herself. Maybe for the first time she knew there wasn't a good script for this moment. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I'm not your safety net either. I'm not the person you call to patch things up when the curated version of our family starts to crack. I've got my own life now, and for once I'm choosing me." There was nothing left to say, so I didn't wait for a response. I simply ended the call. And for the first time in our relationship, it felt like I had finally spoken in a language she couldn't edit. The money I used to set aside for family emergencies now sat in a new account, labeled plainly investment property. Emma. It wasn't revenge. It was redirection. I'd spent most of my adult life saving money with invisible disclaimers just in case Sienna needed another bailout, just in case Dad's health took a dip, just in case Mom hinted again that the roof repair was a bit out of budget. Now I was done preparing to save everyone else. Instead, I was investing in myself. The bungalow I bought wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Every fixture, every inch of paint, every mortgage payment, I chose it. The kind of choice that had always been reserved for other people in my family. Sienna got to chase dreams, crash hard, and land on a soft pile of financial forgiveness. I got caution and responsibility, but not anymore. The second bedroom became a creative space. I refinished the floorboards myself with help from YouTube and an overzealous Home Depot associate. There was something sacred in learning how to make something real, something that didn't require anyone's permission to exist. I built raised beds in the backyard, grew herbs and a few vegetables. Nothing fancy, just life-giving work. The kind you do with your hands and your patience. The kind no one applauds, but that feeds you anyway. A friend of mine, a fellow project manager, asked me over lunch if this was a healing phase. I laughed. "No," I said. "This is a claiming phase." Because for the first time, everything I was building wasn't in service of someone else's comfort. It wasn't invisible scaffolding behind someone else's spotlight. It was mine, and it was enough. I didn't need an audience to witness the transformation. I didn't post progress photos. I didn't send my parents updates hoping for pride. I didn't tell Sienna a thing. It wasn't about them. It was about not shrinking anymore. About taking the energy I used to give away for free and redirecting it into bricks beams, garden beds, and boundaries. People say freedom is about walking away. Sometimes it's about standing still, planting roots so deep no storm can move you. And for a girl who used to flinch when her phone lit up with family names, this silence, this steady hum of a life with no emergencies to manage, it felt like the loudest kind of power I'd ever held. I used to be the fallback, the one you called when things fell apart. The one who had extra batteries, a spare key, a plan B and C already sketched out. The quiet sister who'd reschedule a meeting, hop on a last-minute flight wire money without asking for it back. The rock. Rocks don't get thank you cards, they get stepped on. But in this new life, the one with unpainted baseboards and a garden still learning how to live, I wasn't a fallback anymore. I was a foundation, and not for anyone else's dreams. For mine. It's strange the first time you stop apologizing for being steady, for not being dramatic, sparkly, chaotic. I used to wonder if something was wrong with me for preferring routines over risks, solitude over attention, loyalty over loudness. Turns out that wasn't a flaw. It was a blueprint, the kind that holds up over time. Sienna and Grayson never went on their honeymoon. I heard it through someone else. Mom left a voicemail mentioning therapy and space. There was something about Sienna storming out during a counseling session, accusing Grayson of managing his image better than his behavior. I didn't return the call, because for once, I didn't feel responsible. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the one expected to fly and patch things up smooth over the cracks. I wasn't even expected to listen anymore. And that was the greatest relief of all. Freedom doesn't always arrive in fireworks or fresh starts. Sometimes it arrives in subtler forms: a returned call you don't make a text, you leave unanswered, a brunch invitation you politely decline without guilt. Sometimes it's just a Saturday morning in your own kitchen, barefoot, slicing a grapefruit with no one else's needs knocking at the door. Uncle Theo dropped by a week later. He brought me a set of wind chimes he found at a roadside shop up the coast. They weren't fancy. They didn't match anything in my house. I hung them anyway. We sat on the porch, the sun warm, the silence easy. After a while, he said, "You know your mother's still trying to figure out how everything went wrong." I didn't respond. He sipped his coffee. "And I think she's starting to realize the answer's a lot simpler than she wants it to be." I turned to him. "What's that?" She forgot who was holding up the house. I looked at my new one, modest, imperfect mine, and smiled. "She won't forget again," I said. "But even if she does, I won't." Growing up, I was always assigned a label: the smart one, the responsible one, the boring one. I wore those titles like hand-me-down coats, too tight in some places, too empty in others, and I never got to choose them. They were assigned by tone, by omission, by comparison. Sienna got the sparkle, the chaos, the it factor. I got structure, quiet, predictability. No one ever said it directly, but it was implied in every interaction. I was dependable, not dynamic. Background, not center stage. Solid, but invisible. And for a long time I accepted that. Because if no one else offered me a different story, maybe this was the only one I had. But something happened the day I closed on my home. Something even bigger than signing a mortgage or painting walls or planting herbs in my backyard. I rewrote the label. I wasn't the boring one. I was the one who saw everything, the one who held it together, the one who walked away. That didn't make me cold. It made me clear. I wasn't the afterthought anymore. I wasn't the support beam in someone else's house. I had become the architect of my own. And funny enough, when I stopped trying to belong where I wasn't valued, I stopped feeling bitter. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I did. The smart one. The quiet one. The one who left. Turns out that was the strongest version of me all along. Not an escape, not a disappearance, but a return to something honest. To the girl who never needed a curated role in someone else's wedding, because she had a whole future to build on her own. I used to think life was something you earned your way into, that if you worked hard enough, waited patiently, made yourself small enough not to offend or disrupt someone, would eventually notice you. Hand you a role, a seat at the table, a name tag. But watching that wedding fall apart from the glow of my laptop screen taught me something I hadn't wanted to admit: I was never going to be chosen. Not because I wasn't enough, but because I never needed their permission to begin with. All those years on the sidelines waiting for a turn that never came. They weren't wasted. They were training me to see what others missed, to listen between the lines, to build something lasting without applause. Now when I wake up in my own home with sunlight pouring in and no one expecting anything of me, I don't feel excluded anymore. I feel free. Free from needing to be the fixer. Free from asking for space in someone else's story. Free from proving myself to people who only ever saw what I could do, not who I was. I'm not watching anymore. I'm living it. And that makes all the difference. They tried to patch it up, of course. The PR statements, the family apologies, the Instagram captions about privacy during this sacred time. Sienna and Grayson even posted a carefully filtered photo 2 weeks later, just their hands touching lightly, rings still on. It looked perfect. Again. But I didn't need to see the whole picture to know how fragile it really was. While they scrambled to rebuild their shattered fairy tale, I was laying the foundation of something stronger, something real. Not a performance, not a photo shoot, not a live-streamed illusion of love. A life. My life. Brick by brick, room by room, I had built something no one could take credit for or tear down. I didn't need a floral archway or an aisle lined with roses. I had my porch, my garden, my peace. And it wasn't curated, it was claimed. Emma. Because here's the truth. Being excluded doesn't mean you're unworthy. Being overlooked doesn't mean you're forgettable. And being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes the people who are always in the background are the ones with the clearest view of the whole stage. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who rise, not in revenge, but in power. So if you've ever been the one watching from the sidelines, if you've ever been left out, dismissed, underestimated, know this: you don't have to wait for an invitation to build the life you deserve. Start where you are, with what you have, and make it yours. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the quiet one who finally claimed your voice like this video, subscribe and tell me your story in the comments. Because the quiet ones, we're always watching. And one day, we build empires.